The first season of Marvel's animated What If series was met with an overall positive reaction from fans and critics alike when it premiered 2 years ago. These 9 episodes gave us some of the wildest stories we'd ever seen in the MCU, whether that be zombie Avengers or Ultron with the Infinity Stones. The animation also allowed for these episodes to be full of new and interesting visuals and action sequences, not limited by the actors' abilities or laws of physics. A second season has been on the horizon for a while now, but we've yet to get any official details regarding an official release date. Loki Season 2 will run midway into November, so the earliest a release could come around the end of 2023. But until then, all we can do is dive into the episode baselines that were revealed for the second season. The first episode will be What If Gamora Killed Thanos, which was the episode initially meant to be a part of the first season until COVID delayed production and forced them to shorten the season by an episode, which will now premiere as a part of Season 2. I've also heard that it was removed from Season 1 as some of the plot elements surrounding Gamora were similar to what we saw from the character in Guardians of the Galaxy 3. Just because it's the only episode that we have actual looks at, this is probably one of my more anticipated episodes as of right now. A lot will probably change once we get our first teaser for Season 2, but Gamora looks good in Thanos' armor, and from what I remember, I believe Iron Man is also set to appear in the episode. The next episode is What If Captain Carter Finds Hydra Stomper, which is a continuation of the Season 1 episode. In the initial episode, the roles of Steve Rogers and Peggy Carter from Captain America the First Avenger are in essence swapped, with Peggy being the one to sacrifice herself before she ultimately returns 70 years later. Hydra Stomper was the armor used by Steve to fight in the episode, since he was still a scrawny little self, but I don't see how that armor has a role to play in this episode. Steve would be near the end of his lifespan, if he's even still alive, so I don't expect him to have much of a role in this episode, unless it's similar to what we saw from an elderly Peggy in the later Captain America movies, where it's just short dialogue, maybe a funeral, and that's it. But then that leaves the Hydra Stomper, and while I'm sure there will be a logical reason to include it in the story, probably based off of whatever conflict arises, I doubt it'll be Steve again inside the armor. The next episode is What If the Tesseract landed in the Haudenosaunee Confederacy before the colonization of America. This episode looks like it'll be the most unique of the second season, and add the most to the MCU. The Haudenosaunee Confederacy is made up of the Mohawk, Oneida, Onondaga, Cayuga, and Seneca Native American tribes, and was located in northeast North America and upstate New York, dating back to sometime before Europeans arrived in North America. This episode will introduce a new hero named Kahori, a young Mohawk woman who discovers the Tesseract transforming a lake into a gateway to the stars, leading her on a quest to discover her power. Although it was a bit of a special scenario, it didn't take long for a character from What If to make it into the MCU, with Captain Carter making a cameo appearance in Multiverse of Madness. This is a little different since this is a brand new character created for the animated series, not one being pulled from the comics, but the story interests me a lot in particular because I anticipate it to lean heavily into the Native American culture, and I think it'll be interesting to compare how this magical item from the stars is utilized between two very different societies. In the movies, the Tesseract doesn't appear until the mid-1900s, when it falls into the hands of Hydra and the Nazis, where it's used for weapons and power. Then S.H.I.E.L.D. lays claim to it, and again they research the capabilities of the cube, with plans to wield the energy for weapons under the name of protection. And while it may seem obvious because the technology isn't developed enough at this point in time, I don't think we'll see the Native Americans in this episode start testing the Tesseract and seeing what power they can gain from it. I think it could end up being a much more spiritual and magical approach to it, and I'm looking forward to seeing it. The next episode is What If Hank Pym and Janet Van Dyne fought the Red Guardian during the 1980s. Hank Pym and Janet Van Dyne obviously come from the Ant-Man franchise. Red Guardian was introduced to many in the Black Widow movie. In the MCU, Janet didn't go subatomic until 1987, so I suspect that this will be a What If mission that takes place before those events, potentially not impacting much down the line for her character. I suspect that this will be a very action-heavy episode, but I think this episode will be much more aimed at big fans of the comics who have the connections to these characters during the time period. I personally didn't care much for any of the characters coming out of Black Widow, and we haven't seen much of Hank and Janet in their prime when they were fighting and going out on missions, so I don't really know what I'm getting into here. I assume it'll be a solid episode, and I'm going to keep my expectations low, so I don't go in with any preconceived notions, but I get the feeling that this will be much more enjoyed by others than myself. The next episode is What If Yondu delivered Star-Lord to Ego, and as a big fan of Guardians of the Galaxy, this one interests me a lot. This is one of the more predictable what-ifs, in which I think this was a question that a lot of fans could have thought of following the second installment in the franchise, but it's going to be an interesting one to see play out on screen. Most of the episode I assume will focus on a younger Star-Lord. I doubt there will be a Mantis there, but the good news is that we'll get to see more of Yondu and Ego, both at a younger age. The following episode is What If Happy Hogan Saved Christmas, and I'm not really sure what this one is supposed to be, It's some alternate storyline stemming from Iron Man 3. Maybe one where Happy is the one to solve the Extremis and Mandarin mysteries, but I'm not sure. Iron Man 3 is one of my favorite MCU films, so I'm happy we'll be going back to that story, but it's hard for me to get excited for this one maybe until we know more. I don't know when a trailer will be released for the series, but that will do a lot to give us an idea of what these episodes will be about and which ones to look forward to. The next one, What If Wanda Had Grown Up Watching Musicals Instead of Sitcoms, is a bit on the lighter side. Each episode of WandaVision was based off of a different sitcom that we can assume she saw growing up, so now rather than those, it'll be a bunch of musicals. It will be interesting how they collapse a full streaming series into a singular animated episode, and how much of the genre change will impact the story we saw play out in WandaVision. But this will be a nice break to what could be some more tense episodes in the season. The penultimate episode will be What If Odin and Hela Faced Wenwu, and I feel like this episode could easily be the best of the season. For one, it'll give us a look at Hela before she was banished by Odin. We get a brief history lesson in Thor Ragnarok after Thor learned about his banished sister, and how Odin and Hela had gone around conquering realms and such. We'll get to see both Asgardians again for the first time since Ragnarok came out in 2017. And Odin is likely not going to be the same benevolent leader we saw throughout the films. We'll get to see him more at the height of his power and strength as he engages in full-on battle with some morally grey decisions. And we might even see a nicer side of Hela, if that's possible for the goddess of death. None of these characters really stand out to me as the good guys of the situation though, so I'm interested to see how this conflict arises. Wenwu was a character that was killed off right after being introduced in Shang-Chi, but the fact that we're going to see him battling two gods shows just how powerful the Ten Rings are. We got to see some extent of their power in the film, and the post-credit scene teased a bit at their origins, but we haven't gotten any follow-up to that yet. It's possible that this could come in the Marvels, but otherwise this What If episode will potentially give us some details about the origins of these weapons. The final episode, part of What If Season 2, is What If the Avengers had fought Surtur. This one has me scratching my head a bit, because we already saw Thor somewhat defeat him on his own, so I don't see the reason as to why we need an episode like this. It might have something to do with Ragnarok and saving Asgard. Maybe Thor calls in help to stop Asgard from being destroyed or something. Because of the scope of the battle, I anticipate it'll have some great action, which is what most of these are good for anyways, but story-wise I'm not expecting much. How excited are you for What If Season 2? Let me know in the comments below. Remember to like the video and subscribe for more Marvel coverage, and remember to follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. Thank you all for watching, and remember, the Force will be with you, always.